Welcome, Jet fans, to another episode of the Jets Life podcast. We're in week two of the preseason schedule and our joint practices with the Carolina Panthers. We had one of those practices. One was canceled due to weather, but the Jets still managed to participate and have a, te- a team practice with just offense versus defense, ones versus ones, twos versus twos. So they will get the work in. Didn't lose a day of practice, which was definitely a concern with the off day Friday, and then leading into the week. So they're able to get the normal practice schedule in, just not that second joint practice, which those practices are always beneficial. It works almost as a preseason game since most of these preseason games the starters don't really play for an extended period of time. So the Jets were able to get those practices in, albeit not with the Carolina Panthers for both practices. Just wanted to go over a few things heading into our second preseason game with the Panthers. Just a couple of reports that have been coming out of the Jets practices, and just players that are kind of popping an eye up a little bit. Uh, Players to keep an eye on, and especially with the last few preseason games, and if some of these players can kind of continue their stride, could play significant roles during the regular season for the Jets. So one player that kind of it makes things a little interesting. I think that we've been seeing a lot about Bam Knight kind of showing a little bit more promise in this second year. Obviously, he came on the scene in the Chicago game last year. Had a brilliant game then. Followed up by a couple other good games throughout the season. But obviously, that offensive line last year took a major hit, and it wasn't creating enough holes for him. In fact, he was tackled behind the line of scrimmage more frequently than you would like for a rookie running back, especially an undrafted free agent that the Jets were able to sign. So it's good to see that he seems to be a key contributor in the passing game. You see a lot of highlights coming out of the Jets social media page showing Bam Knight getting a little screen pass or a little short intermediate pass to him, and he's able to make a couple of moves and get into the open field. So it kind of goes in line a little bit. I know the Jets brought in Dalvin Cook a few weeks ago, and he left without a deal. I think part of the Jets' plans there, it seems like they are okay with going with Bam Knight if Dalvin's not willing to take the money that's on the table. There have been reports out there that they're about $3 million off. Kind of figure that the Jets are probably in that like $4 to $5 million range, where he's probably more in that $8 to $9 million range, somewhere in that range. Um, Obviously, $3 million is a lot of money. It's almost half the contract that they're separated by from the Jets' perspective. So it kind of you know reignites the idea that maybe Bam Knight could expand his role. Had a great year last year. In the limited games he did play. And obviously, Michael Carter is kind of the player that we would love to see kind of take that step forward and be that second running back on this roster behind Brees Hall, assuming Brees Hall is healthy. Um, it sounds like Bam Knight has taken that running back competition, and is kind of really cementing himself as that second running back on the squad. What does that mean for Michael Carter and some of the other running backs on this team? I think you know Michael Carter. He showed a lot of promise as a rookie. You would love to see him kind of straighten things out a little bit. Played through injuries last year, but he's a great locker room guy. I mean, every time you see him kind of in these practices or in these videos, and that the Jets social media page are kind enough to share with us, he's always upbeat, always positive. And that definitely drives well with the locker room. I think that's a huge asset to this team because the Jets kind of thrive on high character individuals. So in an ideal world, you have multiple backs that do different things, which the Jets do have. Just really interested to see how they incorporate Michael Carter, and if Dalvin Cook does come in, where does that leave this running back room? Because I don't think that there's you know enough plays to be run for all four of these running backs to get time on the field. Not to mention, it seems like Nick Bawden is kind of taking on some shares as well as a fullback. Jets might incorporate a fullback a little bit more than they have in the past, as Green Bay did for years with Nate Hackett there, and also obviously Aaron Rodgers. So they do like the idea of having a fullback back there. So, obviously, five guys in the backfield, it just makes the numbers game a little hard when you have a 53-man roster. So, you know, it's a good problem to have when you have a lot of players. It makes those tough decisions. You just hate to see one of your players that you were high on leaving, going somewhere else, and having a great career as well. Would like to have that great career with us, but obviously you can't keep all these guys. Wish the best for whoever is the odd man out to move on and have a great career elsewhere. Um, Touched on it a little bit earlier. As far as where Bam was having some issues last year, that O-line kind of fell apart at the end of the year, and early in training camp, it doesn't seem like the O-line is really moving, anywhere in a positive direction. They seem during during the Jets practices, you always heard the defensive line was kind of winning those battles. Obviously, the Jets defensive line is a little bit ahead of schedule compared to what the Jets O line is from a development standpoint, from overall talent standpoint. I don't think it's a big shock to say that the Jets defensive line is probably a little bit higher on the talent scale. Um, but it's becoming a little bit alarming because now we went into the Panthers joint practices and there were still issues. Obviously, Brian Burns got around these guys a little bit. Brian Burns is a freak athlete. I'm not too worried there, but it got to the point where the media, social media, there were a couple of reporters identifying that there was a little bit of frustration from Aaron Rodgers in post game press conference. I didn't really see it, but obviously Rodgers is amazing with a mic. I don't think he's gonna kind of voice too much frustration on his own teammates. Kind of puts a target on their back, and I don't think he wants to do that. So obviously, you know, take that for what it's worth. But the Jets O line obviously has something to figure out. We know Dwayne Brown's missing. Mekhi Becton isn't really getting the first team reps. Um, and the interior looks pretty solid. Obviously, Laken Tomlinson had a down year last year. Kind of hope he rebounds from that. Center seems like it's Connor McGovern's job, unless Joe Tittman does something over the next few weeks to really kind of put himself in that conversation to take the job from McGovern. And then you have Elijah Vera Tucker. And there's a lot of musical chairs that can happen with this offensive line. And something that would be interesting to see is, assuming Dwayne Brown gets back and he's ready for week one, which by all indications, Robert Saleh has made it abundantly clear that he believes that he will be ready. And even Rodgers doubled down on that in his press conference. I believe it was on Wednesday during that press conference. So it really just seems like the Jets are under the understanding that Dwayne Brown will be there, and the assumption is he will be their left tackle. Then you go to the right side, and Max Mitchell has, he had a rough opening week of the preseason. Not going to kill him for it, obviously. Had a pretty decent year last year, filling in as a right tackle when Jets really didn't have that, you know, thought of him starting. Played really well. He kind of, you know, held his own over there, but for whatever reason, um, he's come back this year and hasn't looked the same. So it kind of begs the question of, one, I mean, the Jets didn't address offensive tackle. They couldn't do it in the draft. Obviously, the top guys were all gone by the time the Jets were picking at 15. Didn't really address it in free agency. And I mean, they did address the offensive line in free agency by loading up the interior. They brought in Wes Schweitzer. Cologne came in as well. So you have bodies on the inside. Obviously, we've talked about Tittman. You got Connor McGovern, Laken Tomlinson. So there's a lot of bodies on the inside um, with Elijah Vera Tucker, and that's probably the situation I think more likely than not happens. And Robert Saleh even included that in his most recent press conference. They'd like to keep him at right guard, but should this offensive line be in a situation where the best five includes Elijah Vera Tucker playing on the right side, then you get into a situation where your interior looks a little bit different than what we had on paper. Maybe you have McGovern starting at center, and at right guard, you have either Titman playing guard to get him some reps. I mean, if he's playing the way he was played at center in the preseason, I think it really gets to a point where we got to get this guy on the field. But understandably, the Jets probably want a veteran in front of Rodgers in the first year to be able to make all the calls. It's pretty tall ask for a rookie to do that. Not that he can't, but I think it's going to be really important for Rodgers to know that whoever is in front of him at the pivot is going to be able to make the calls, and he can feel confident and comfortable that those calls will be made correctly. When it's a rookie up there, it's just going to give Rodgers a little bit more to do. Um, make sure that he's making the right calls. Make sure he's understanding what the defense line is doing, and if there's any blitz coming. So I think in a perfect world, if Mackay cannot play as a starting right tackle, I mean, in a perfect world, here's our starting five is Brown on the left, Mackay on the right, and obviously going from left to right, you got Laken Tomlinson, you got Connor McGovern, and you've got Elijah Vera Tucker. And then hopefully at some point Joe Tittman kind of comes in as the center, maybe even mid-year, if not sometime next year. But I think that would be the perfect world. But based on what we are hearing and what we've seen throughout the first few weeks of training camp, it really comes off and seems like the offensive line is not where we want it to be. So you get to the point where Dwayne Brown obviously left, and that right tackle, if they have to move Elijah Vera Tucker there, then you got to figure out who your right guard's going to be. Is it going to be Tittman? Is it going to be McGovern, Schweitzer? I mean, that little combination of who will be those interior three, if that happens. Ideally, like I said, we don't have to have this conversation, but it's a talking point for today. Now, go continue with the offensive line. There's been some reports out there that Zach Martin of the Dallas Cowboys is not happy with the contract he's been offered, and he's looking to get a new contract before the season starts. And in fact, the question is, Jets need to keep an eye on that situation, and if he does become available in a trade, it's definitely a decision. It's definitely a call that the Jets would have to make. Going into what I was just saying, that same situation, ideally put you would ideally put Zach Martin at right guard and move Elijah Vera Tucker over to the right side. Now you have an offensive line that has Dwayne Brown on the left side. Laken Tomlinson was a Pro Bowler. Hopefully he can rebound. At center, you got either McGovern or Tittman, and then your right side is just elite with Zach Martin and Elijah Vera Tucker. What would something like that cost? I think you're looking at something in the neighborhood of, it's going to take some assets. So, um, obviously, the Jets are in a situation where they can't really deal anything 2024 related as far as a first or second round pick. Not that I think it would take a first round pick to bring him in, um, but you're looking at a situation where it might come up to like a second, or, I'm sorry, a fourth in this next year's draft, and maybe a second the following, or a third in the following. But it's going to take some assets to bring him in. Um, and obviously, the Jets are a little bit light on draft capital, but you're in a window right now with the Hall of Fame quarterback, and who knows how long he's going to be here. If that offensive line is an issue, it needs to be addressed before the season even starts. So I, you know, can't say enough. The Jets kind of may have dropped the ball a little bit on the outside spots of the offensive line. They did enough with the interior that they can play some musical chairs if needed. But it is August 11th. We still have a month before the season starts. September 11th is our first game, so literally a month away from today is when the season starts. So still plenty of time for the Jets to figure out. I don't think it's really panic mode yet, but as we get closer and closer to the season, if this offensive line continues to struggle, we'll be able to see during the game how they fare, and then obviously I believe next week we have Tampa joint practices. So as these weeks continue to progress, if the Jets defensive line or offensive line continues to struggle, um, you know something's got to be done. Whether it's bringing in a free agent to try and make it work. Usually, you don't find free agents this late in the season, so that I don't see how that's going to work. Or exploring the trade options. But again, offensive linemen are a valuable commodity, and usually teams aren't just ready to unload offensive linemen left and right, especially this, this stage in training camp. So we'll continue a little bit further. So we got some positive injury updates. Garrett Wilson, who's missed some time. I think the initial ankle injury happened a little bit over a week ago. Maybe a little more than that. It seems like forever, just because I mean the guy was all over the map when he was practicing, and I feel like we haven't seen a highlight reel play from him for quite some time. But it's awesome to see that he got back on the field, and there were some videos out there of him kind of running his routes cleanly. Didn't seem to have too much stress on the ankle. You know, you really wanted to see him get back on the field. Obviously, I just didn't want to rush him back. Seems like he's back up to par. I don't expect him to play any preseason games, or at least this upcoming preseason game. Give him a little more time to get that ankle right. But definitely a pleasant surprise to see him getting on the field. Um, Continuing with the injuries, Sauce Gardner missed the first practice with the Panthers, but I think he did come back in a limited role yesterday. So positive news there. Again, another situation. Robert Saleh didn't seem too worried about Sauce's availability, um, and seemed to just be precautionary to keep him out for a little bit. Um, I think we all know what Sauce is and understand what he's capable of. There don't really see a need to rush him back. I don't think he needs all of the practice reps, but obviously you want to see him kind of keep building on what he's done this offseason and throughout the training camp. So, you know, positive news to get Garrett Wilson back. And defensive line seems to be kind of coming back altogether. Carl Lawson is still um, inactive, so a little bit of a concern there, but it sounds like, again, the Jets are being optimistic and not overly worried with that. With Carl Lawson, obviously, Jets restructure his contract. He'll be a free agent at the end of this year. He took a pay cut. Awesome for him to do that. But it does his injury kind of allows the Jets to get a better look at Will McDonald in that spot. Jermaine Johnson's been getting a lot of first team reps in Carl Lawson's absence, so it's obviously good to see that the Jets are able to kind of get these defensive linemen, these younger guys, a little bit more time, a little bit more plays to see how they progress. Will McDonald has to this point exceeded my expectations for sure. He's you know we saw that opening preseason game. Obviously, it was against backup players, so take that for what it's worth. But he's still out there and doing the things that you heard about when after the Jets drafted him. He's a freak athlete, gets around the edge really quickly, and then I mean that spin move he has is gonna cause some problems for defensive linemen. In the first preseason game, he made that spin move that went viral and had a straight beeline to the quarterback. And I remember reading, I believe it was Zach Rosenblatt, I believe, put out there that in one of the Panthers practice, he was able to do the same thing pretty much to Ikem Ekwonu, first round pick last year for Carolina. So again, it's just positive to see that this defensive line is able to get enough reps for these younger guys because during the season, it's going to be very interesting to see how Robert Saleh and Ulbrich are able to incorporate all these players. I mean, we all know that they run a rotation, so all these players will see the field. But at this point, at this stage, with Carl Lawson missing some time, they will get a little bit of a better look out of these younger guys. So with all that, what are our expectations for preseason week 2? Obviously, preseason, I don't really care so much about the results, but what I do want to see out of the preseason is a few things. One, Zach Wilson had a had a pretty good game against Cleveland. Made his throws, made a few plays. But in a couple of situations on third down, I feel like those drives stalled. Would have been nice to get a few more yards, keep the drives going, and obviously potentially score a touchdown with the starters or with the starters for the game. And I think that expectation can be kind of carried over into this game. Just want to see progress out of Zach. I mean, obviously we all we, we all know it's been how he continued to progress as he did in the first game, and maybe take that next step a little bit. Um, you know, keep the momentum going. From all accounts, he's had a good camp. Threw his first interception a couple days ago. Um, in I believe it was on the Tuesday practice. So really positive to see that he's kind of progressing, and the tutelage from Rodgers is kind of carrying over to Zach Wilson, and he's you're always seeing in these practices, Zach is basically in Aaron Rodgers' hip, and they're talking constantly. So whatever they're talking about, it is getting in between the head of Zach Wilson, and you just want to see that carry over into a game atmosphere and see how he kind of builds on what he had in the first game. Can he take that next step? Can he keep those drives going? Can he make that extra completion on third down to, extend the drive? And eventually, can he find his way into the end zone? These are all the things that, kind of in that slow build of development for a quarterback. Ideally, this happens in year one, but here we are in year three. We'll take whatever's out there. But so that's the first thing I want to see, just steady progress from Zach Wilson. Number two, Mekhi Becton, obviously, in the first preseason game, I think it was in an interview that Robert Saleh had. He said that he wanted Mekhi to be around 20 to 25 snaps. And no injury happened, thankfully. But Mekhi did exit the game after 7 snaps, and the reasoning behind that, or at least his reason behind that, was that the turf wasn't friendly for a guy of his size. Okay, I mean, I'm not gonna say anything too much in that detail, but obviously, you would like to see him kind of push himself and keep himself out on the field. Um, Obviously, not challenging who he is as a person, but you want to see him kind of push himself a little bit more this game, because as Robert Saleh said, it's not about being the starting left tackle or starting right tackle or whatever have you. It's about, for him, getting through these games, getting through practice weeks. Because at the end of the day, you can be labeled as a starter, but if you miss, you know, if like what happened 2 years ago, week one in Carolina, he was starting left tackle, got injured, and then missed, the rest of the season. So does it really matter if you're a starter if your body just doesn't have the ability to keep you in there? So durability is a big concern, as we all know for Mackay. So in this game, you just like to see whatever snap count is in Salah's head. He didn't want to give an exact number this time around, it sounds like, just because of what happened in the first game. But you'd like to see Mackay at least get through the first quarter, maybe even make it through the half is really, I think, would be the ideal situation. But obviously, he's got to be on the field a little bit more than he was in the first game for us to feel a little more confident, especially, as mentioned earlier with the concerns on the offensive line. Everything turns around drastically if Mackay is able to be our right tackle to open the season. But, as by all accounts right now, it doesn't seem like he's even getting reps at right tackle. So a little bit of a concern there. I wonder if that changes after this week, if he's able to progress and play a decent amount of snaps in this game. Who knows? Maybe the Jets feel a little confidence in asking him to move to the right side when Dwayne returns. Who knows? But Mackay is the big one. I just want to see him kind of take an extra step and keep moving in that direction. Um, Another player too that I'm highly interested to see. Um, Not sure if he's going to get many reps in these preseason games, but it would be interesting. Is Tony Adams? Throughout this whole and I'll be one of the first to say safety was a big position of concern for me. Jordan White had a little bit of a down year last year. Well, down year compared to what he was in the past. I think we expect a little bit more out of him as a free agent signing. But obviously, coming into a new system, I would expect year two to be a little bit better. So wasn't overly concerned with Whitehead, but I was hoping that the Jets would address some sort of free safety addition, somebody that can kind of play the deep middle. Jets haven't had a player like that in quite some time, and I was hoping that that was something that they would kind of try to explore, try to identify areas to improve that. And I seem to have been completely wrong because from all accounts throughout this entire training camp, you've heard the name Tony Adams come up way too frequently being a good thing. His name is all over the map. You know, he's making plays all over the place. He caused a fumble the other day. Um, it's something very positive to build off because he came off at the end of the year last year, played some reps at safety. I think he finished up the last 3 or 4 games as the primary safety and played well. Did he make game changing plays? No, the guy was an undrafted rookie, so I mean, obviously not expecting that. But it seems like something clicked. I mean, for when the Jets put him on the field, you know, they don't put rookies on the field lightly. I mean, they put him out there, and he seemed to have earned enough respect in that locker room and with this coaching staff and the front office to where they felt that there wasn't a need to bring in a primary safety. They did bring in Chuck Clark, but I think more of the reason for that was for him to almost be like a third linebacker type of thing um, behind Jamie Sherwood or I'm sorry, in front of Jamie Sherwood and kind of rotating that way. And then obviously, replacing reps with Whitehead and Jets ideally would have a three safety look on a lot of their downs. And I think that was the initial plan with Chuck Clark was to be that kind of third safety guy with this team. Obviously, he got injured. Jets brought in Amos, so they do still have like a good slate of top three safeties. But I'm very excited to see you know what what this season and what maybe this next preseason game holds for Tony Adams. It's been a long time since we had a legit center field safety, and I wonder if Tony Adams can develop into that. The Jets seem to be really high on him, and it comes not just from the coaching staff. It's not just Robert Saleh speak, but many players have talked about it, and is that he's developing and he's moving along as you expect a second year player to do, and really taking strides. So really excited to kind of see where things go from here. And then sticking with the defense, I did mention his name earlier. Jamie and Sherwood had a pretty decent opening preseason game. Like to see him kind of keep building on that, just like I said with Zach. Just keep building. He did force that fumble in the opening game, and he was, from all accounts, the primary linebacker as the game started. So just want to keep seeing him building off that, and I'll throw Chaz Surratt in that mix as well. For all you Jeff fans that watched, I believe it was the Hard Knocks, yeah, Hard Knocks, where Robert Saleh was just raving about Chaz Surratt. There's something there. I mean I don't know if that was just the cameras or what it was, but I mean I don't see a real reason for Saleh to just be you know just glowing, endorsing about Chaz Surratt on the sidelines, cameras or not. There's definitely something there, and is there a legitimate shot that this guy makes the 53-man roster? I mean, linebacker is one of our weaker positions. I mean, I know CJ Mosley's locked in. We know Quincy's locked in. We know Sherwood's locked in. But there's going to be some competition for that fourth linebacker spot if the Jets decide to keep that many linebackers. I think they're opening 53 last year had 4 linebackers on there, so that would kind of put Chaz Surratt as in that mix of being that additional linebacker. So, I'm gonna keep an eye on there. But again, just those are just a few players I was just interested to see what this week entails. And I'll even throw Titman in there as well. Sorry, he had a great opening week as well. So just want to see how he kind of progresses and moves things forward. And the most important thing, obviously, with these preseason games, just want to leave with a clean bill of health. Had a couple injuries last week. I think Hamza left with an injury, so you know definitely just want to see the Jets get out of this game with as clean of a bill of health as possible. So I think it comes down to a point where you know starters probably don't play a significant role in this game, obviously. Um, and like I said earlier, these joint practices are supposed to be what the preseason games are. It's just more of a controlled environment. where players aren't getting tackled, going to the floor, and that's where injuries kind of can arise. So the Jets, maybe they go into this and say, okay, we didn't get that additional work on day two with the Panthers, so maybe we'll play the stars a little bit more. Just want to see as limited as possible, while also kind of getting a little bit of a glimpse of these young guys that do need these in-game reps and these kind of situational practices. Well, just wanted to say thank you to everyone who was able to join. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to my channel, and follow me on Twitter at the Jets Life Podcast. So at Jets Life Podcast is my Twitter handle. Um, and again, thank you for joining, and let's go Jets.